name is Raivo Vetik. I'm professor of comparative politics at Tallinn University. In the start, I would like to say a few words in Estonian language. Ja ma teen seda eesti keeles sellepärast, et see on isiklik
I am going
asi.
to do it in Estonian because it is something that is very personal. I have to apologize because I was planning to deliver my speech in sitting, and I think that people who have a grey beard can afford that.
So, let us start. First of all, I would like to say that I have been participating in integration conferences in Tallinn from the very beginning, from the end of 1990s when integration policies started in Estonia. And I can recall that in the first conference we had here people like Will Kimlicka, John Berry, etc., who are world famous people in integration research. And in this context, I'm very happy about our today's panel. I'm very happy that we have Adrian Feivel and Lea Klarenbeck. Adrian is a leading voice in the critical integration studies already for many years. Lea is a young scholar, but she already has made an important contribution criticizing actually critical integration studies. I think we all three share kind of anti-essentialist, anti-substantialist theoretical core, a kind of anti-mainstream liberal integration conceptualization, but we all do it in different ways. And so it will be, I think, very, very interesting to figure out how exactly we do. So, first, I will discuss main schools in integration studies by differentiating between liberal mainstream and the so-called resistance turn or critical integration studies. Then I will propose my own conceptualization, what I call field relational conceptualization of integration studies. And my presentation will end by a kind of illustrative case study on national identity in Estonia, which is based on field theoretical approach. And my work right now is based on a project which is called MIRNET, Migration and Integration Research Network. And on the slide you can see one article which is based on the theoretical framework I and my colleagues at MIRNET project we are developing. Within this project, our aim is to provide new meta-theoretical framework, what we call field relationalism. On that basis, we have offered new design for empirical study of integration, and in that case on national identity. In Estonian integration policies, the concept of national identity is central in a sense that it is one of the generalized measures of the level of integration of Estonian society. This started about 6-7 years ago, and this is exactly related to my research area. So, for the start, few words about relational movement as such, and particularly relational paradigm in migration and integration studies. I'll reduce myself to the latter. Here you see some of the names: Biao Xiang, director of Max Planck Institute, doing very interesting research on migration, migrant integration, Wilhelm Schinkel. Actually, I'll be talking about his approach today, and I'm sure that other panelists will do the same. In addition, in citizenship study, ENG in ISIN, etc., etc. So actually there is a kind of very large academic movement based on relationalist approach. But as I said, there are kind of internal differences. So let us now focus on the current state of affairs in immigration integration studies in Europe. First of all, probably everybody would agree that integration is a contested concept. I said in the beginning that I've been participating in all the conferences, and probably I've been speaking also in all the conferences, and every time I have said one sentence, and I do the same also today. And the sentence is as follows: integration is not about making people happy. Integration is about tension, about management of tension. Integration is, if I use the terminology from relationalist paradigm, battleground. Integration is classification struggle in which different sides try to universalize their own particular view. And here in the first sentence, you see how it is done in Estonian. There is a Russian language expression in Estonia, опять интегрируют. They again try to integrate ourselves. And from my point of view, from field relational perspective on integration, this is a kind of valid perspective on integration. It reflects one view on the field, which is not happy about what is going on in the mainstream. So integration is essentially a contested concept. And in broad terms, we can differentiate between substantialist meta-theories, ontologies, and on the other hand, processualist meta-theories and ontologies represented by several people. I'll be talking about the work of the people you see on the slide. Let us start from the liberal mainstream concept of integration. It is based on modernization paradigm and particularly on the concept of society of Emil Durkheim, which presumes that society is internally homogeneous and externally different from other societies. The purpose of Durkheim in introducing this concept was twofold. First, to figure out what is a research object of sociology. And in this context, he established the notion of society. On the other hand, he also introduced the basic dichotomy of modernization theory, which is differentiation between traditional and modern types of societies. And within this differentiation, modern type of society is defined as internal, developed, and differentiated, as opposed to traditional type of society. And from this conceptualization, you get that there is actually a kind of internal necessity for reintegration if you have this kind of concept of society as Durkheim has provided, and which is the basis of mainstream liberal concept of integration, and which is problematic from the point of view of critical integration studies. Here are just some examples from the mainstream. Rinus Penix is one of the most well-known European integration scholars. If you look at his definition of the concept of integration, you see that it is a kind of neutral, non-normative, and the problem of this type of approach is that integration is essentially contested concept. It is a battlefield, but there is no mark of battle in this kind of descriptive definition of integration. Second example is John Berry. As I said, John Berry has been very, very important for Estonian conceptualization of integration already 20 years ago. He differentiates between two dimensions: cultural maintenance by minority and participation in larger society. In both dimensions, he gets two types, and he cross-tabulates these types, and at the end he gets 4 ideal types. Integration means maintenance of minority culture, and at the same time participation of minority in larger society. This conceptualization looks very, very nice from a kind of surface level, but the problem with this definition is that it is not clear where is culture in this type of definition, because it is a kind of individual-based. Culture is a group phenomenon. Actually, a famous social psychologist, Harry Triandis, said in one of his, exactly asked this question in one of his articles: where is culture in this type of conceptualization of integration? From the point of view of field relationalism, we can ask another question: where is society, where is politics in this type of conceptualization, if it talks just about psychological processes? So it is clear that there is some truth to this type of conceptualization of integration, but it is too much psychological. Now let us move to the so-called resistance turn, which is exemplified by Willem Schinkel. And his approach is exactly based on critique, what I have been talking about, critique of the concept of society, based on Durkheim, based on a kind of organicist view of society, which starts from a kind of relationship between parts and whole. Whole consists of different parts, and integration is about how these parts are related to each other. The problem Willem Schinkel shows with this kind of approach is that we do not have wholes in social life. We do not have internally totally homogeneous entities which would be totally differentiated from other types of entities. I will not go into all details in Schinkel's approach, but basically what he says that this mainstream liberal conceptualization of integration represents imposition of the dominated position view, imposition of the majority point of view, and he says that this is indefensible. Here actually my critique would come in what sense it is indefensible. If it is imposition by the dominated, then dominated will defend it. Dominant subject position is one position in the field, and its job is to defend its field interest, as the job of the dominated subject position is to do. So from the field relational perspective, this type of approach remains as one-sided as the other liberal mainstream approach, and in this sense this just represents a kind of mirror image of the approach it is criticizing. Now, Joe Turner has made a very interesting contribution in a journal special issue a few years ago, Citizenship from Marginal Spaces, and he differentiates between two types of resistance. He himself represents a so-called decolonial approach to conceptualizing integration, and his point is that, you know, we have two ways to resist. I mean, minorities dominated subject position has two ways to resist. One way is to accept the dominating framework, which is based on the dichotomy exclusion-inclusion. And in this context, then we can try to pressure on inclusion, to say that exclusion is non-democratic, etc., and to pressure on inclusion. And he says in a very, very smart way that, you know, the problem with this type of approach is that agency is associated only with dominant subject position, because minority is either excluded or excluded. There is no agency from the part of minority, and in this sense, this type of approach would not work. And actually, this is what we see in our everyday life all over the world, in the European Union, America, etc., etc. The basic approach is exclusion-inclusion, but as critical integration studies say, it just does not work. So in this context, there is another way they have proposed, which is to ask a radical question: what it is to belong, which means that the proposal is to introduce a kind of new framing, which is based on the field interest of the minority. But from a field relational point of view, my question would be, in what sense this type of conceptualization would be better. So this slide just repeats what I said, and from my position, what is alternative? Alternative is to differentiate between, on both sides, radical and moderate subject position. Not just to talk about majorities and minorities, but within both we have radical and moderate sections. And if we are talking about integration, then the proposal is that we should focus on moderate subject position on both sides. They can make political coalition, and there is a probability that they can win. So, to now finish the first part of my presentation, how much do I have? But I understand that Aya is missing, so yeah, we have up to 12 o'clock, basically. I will not be speaking up to 12 o'clock, but still. Yeah, and let us finish now the first section of this presentation by the question, a kind of provocative question from both mainstream and critical integration studies point of view. And the question is based on the fact that everybody knows that current conceptualization is based on, is majority-centered, based on field interest of the dominated subject position. And the question is, do we need to overcome the majority-centered point of view? And my answer is both yes and no. And yes, in a sense that, as I said, our aim should be to find a kind of balance between two sides. And if currently majority point of view dominates, it is in the center. This indicates that the system is not in balance, and in this sense we have to overcome majority point of view. But on the other hand, my answer also would be no, because overcoming of the majority point of view doesn't mean that we should reject it totally, because it represents certain objective field interest, and it would be utopian to say that majority, please do not defend your field interest. And in literature, the closest what I have found is Biao-Xiang's conceptualization of meta theories in integration and integration research, which says that we can be critical towards both sides, but at the end we need to keep both sides on the board. So now let us move to the case study, illustration. I've been talking about theories. Now I would like to demonstrate what is the essence of the approach we have proposed. And this demonstration consists of several steps. The first step, the idea of the first step, is just to bring in the concept of asymmetric social field, or asymmetric interesting field, which is important in a sense of how exactly do we measure integration. My point is, due to the fact that the integration field is asymmetric, there are huge problems to carry out measurement of integration, because if positions are located in different places, here is just an example. It is a kind of thought experiment. Let us figure out that there is a questionnaire and a survey going on, and in survey we have both ethnic Estonians and Estonian Russians, and there is a question in respect of labor market equality, and both respondents, ethnic Estonian and Estonian Russian, say that they think that equality in labor market would be important to achieve. But now the trick is that this answer of, on the one hand, Russian person, on the other hand, Estonian person, comes from different position, because everybody in Estonia knows that currently there is inequality. We know that salary gap is 20%, positions in high positions in ministries are occupied by Estonians, etc., etc. And actually, this is repeated also in the beginning of the survey. There is a kind of description in the beginning that there are this and this inequalities, and then the question about the ideal of equality is asked. And my point here is that if ethnic Estonian respondent says that we need equality, then what he actually says, he says that ethnic Estonians need to give up their higher economic status. And if a Russian person would ask to the same question in the same way, then his answer is that what we need is to overcome the lower economic status of Russian language position in Estonia. So we have similar questions, similar answers, but my point is that we need to interpret these different, similar answers in different ways, due to the fact that the Estonian integration field is asymmetric. So, and let's now go to the notion of national identity, which in Estonian integration policies is regarded as a kind of generalized measure of integration of Estonian society. And regarding this notion, we have implemented exactly the procedure I was just describing. We figure out that Estonia is, on the one hand, not only nation state, but in Estonian context we would say ethnic nation state. If you look at the preamble of Estonian constitution, it says that Estonian state is meant to defend Estonian language, culture, etc., which is ethnic phenomena, not national phenomena in English language sense. So, according to Estonian constitution and law, Estonia is both ethnic nation state and multicultural state, and also liberal state based on principles of individual rights, etc., etc. So what we see that there is tension even in Estonian constitution, and it is inevitable. Social life consists of tension. So these two principles these two ideas are in conflict because ethnic nation state is based on a kind of ideal of national homogeneity, and multicultural state idea is based on ideal cultural pluralism as richness, etc., etc. So one can say that these two ideals represent field interest of, on the one hand, majority, on the other hand, majority group. And in this context, we exactly go to this balanced view of integration, meaning that, if integration means overcoming the particular bias towards your own field interest and the recognition of the other side, then this just means that we need a balance. And the rest of my presentation just demonstrates. I'll finish in 2 minutes. Here are questions we use to operationalize the concept of national identity, which means in case of Estonian Russians, we pushed on national homogeneity issues. In case of Estonian represents, we asked how much they're willing to include Russians, to take into account their opinions, etc., etc. Here is just a kind of basic result. Our procedure was to divide national identity in the scale into three groups: low level, intermediate level, and high level of national identity. These are numbers from the last integration monitoring, and I would say that the general picture is that ethnic Estonians and Estonian Russians are quite similar. There are some differences, but the big picture is that they are quite similar. So, and to end, what are the policy implications deriving from these different conceptualizations? My point first is that the mainstream literature and mainstream measurement of integration fails to problematize inter-ethnic social hierarchies, and in this context they tend to presume that, for example, in case of national identity, it should be higher among majority group as compared to minority group. And in this sense, it represents a majority-centered approach. But the final message here is that in integration policies, we should focus not just on individuals, not just on one or the other group. What is important is the inter-ethnic field as a whole. So we need to take measures which are targeting integration field as a whole and which aim to make the field more balanced. Thank you very much.